Okay, we'll get started here. I'm sure many of you have already downloaded the NKF meeting app, but if not, please make sure you have it downloaded so you can complete all pre-tests, post-tests, and evaluations on site. No need to take these tasks home. Downloading the app will also allow you to interact with spring clinical meeting sessions, polling, and Q&A. Presentation slides are available on the mobile app and Spring Clinical Meeting portal. And you have given permission for slides to be used? Yes. Okay. Share your experience on social media with the hashtag NKF Clinicals. And do you call NKF your professional home? Myself and close to half of our attendees are NKF professional members. You receive a huge discount to join us again in Orlando at 2027 Spring Clinical Meeting, and more as an NKF professional member. Visit kidney.org/membership. Now, it is my great pleasure to introduce our two speakers. Jacob will go first, and Sharon will go after Jacob, but I'm going to do both introductions at the same time. Dr. Jacob May is an assistant professor at Pennington Biomedical Research Center. He earned his bachelor's degree in nutrition from Case Western Reserve University in Cleveland, Ohio, and his PhD in kinesiology, nutrition, and rehabilitation sciences from the University of Illinois at Chicago. He directs the Mitochondrial Energetics and Nutrient Utilization Lab, which uses clinical translational research approaches to understand how diet affects human health and nutrition. His current focus is the connection between ketogenic dietary approaches, mitochondrial bioenergetics, and the pulmonary system. And he was supported through a K01 grant from the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute to pursue this line of research. In addition to his research interests, Dr. May owns a private practice that delivers medical nutrition therapy and preventive nutrition services, staying abreast of modern trends in nutrition and lifestyle intervention. Sharon Stahl is a graduate of the University of Hawaii School of Public Health and a renal nutrition expert with over 40 years of experience in hemodialysis and peritoneal dialysis. She's a renal dietitian for Rochester Regional Health System and a member of the NKF serving upstate and western New York Medical Advisory Board. She was a lead investigator in body composition research in peritoneal dialysis patients, published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition. She has served for 2 decades on the editorial advisory board of the Journal of Renal Nutrition and as product update editor. She was named NKF Region 1 recognized renal dietitian, has lectured on renal nutrition at the University of Buffalo Medical School, and presented Eating for Kidney Health through Rochester Regional Health's Wellness Wednesday series. Most recently, she has participated in a study using the lifestyle medicine tool given to hemodialysis patients. The abstracts are presented at this meeting. I am very honored to introduce both of these speakers, and I know we are in for a treat today with all of their vast experiences. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Appreciate the introduction. I know we have a small group today, so please, as I go through this, we're going to leave time at the end for Q&A, but if there's any topics you guys want to dive into, just throw a hand up or something, and then we can just chat about it. All right, let's see if we get the slides. Okay, perfect. So we have this session split into 2 parts. I'm going to start talking mainly about sarcopenia, what we know about it, muscle physiology, protein turnover, how do our muscles grow, and how do they get broken down. and factors that can impact that. And then we're going to transition over to Sharon to talk more about the clinical application, tools that clinicians may have, sort of interventional programs, those sort of items, and the chronic kidney disease specific stuff. I did want to start with a poll for any of you that are practicing. Do you routinely screen for sarcopenia? If you have the time to jump on and scan this, that would be great. I would also, I know sometimes you guys are familiar with the terminology protein energy wasting, or PEW. Go ahead and include that in here. We'll merge them together now. I will split that out as we get into the talk, but it would be good to, oh man, very cool. All right, so 2 of you are awesome. That's good. Good to see. Yeah, I did expect more no's, but it's really cool to see that we do have some people that do this already. So that does help as well. But cool stuff. Let this go for another minute. Yes, kind of dominating. Neat. All right. And then I do have one more poll, which we'll just go through quickly. But this is, okay, especially for those of you that are screening, do you feel confident downstream after you screen and you identify people? Do you feel confident in what we should do with them? Right? How do we give them approaches, especially on the lifestyle end? I am a dietitian, so I'm always going to promote the preventative lifestyle sort of approach. But you know, there's certainly other ways we have, and some pharmacological agents as well. So it looks like we have modestly confident up there, some somewhat, some nots, a couple super confidence. All right, so I will say this. So I don't practice in the CKD realm in the classical sense in a hospital or anything like that. So any of you that are on that super confident realm, if you want to chat further, I open your comments throughout this talk as well. I hope to do my best to dive in and best represent what's going on and is relevant to the clinical standpoint, but by all means, I am open to comments and really expanding this so that we can give the best information to everyone here. But cool, thank you for participating in those polls. That was really nice to see. I do appreciate the history of how we get certain places, so I will show some background here on the development of sarcopenia. The term was really only popularized in the 1990s, and you see it was coined here in '89. If you break down the word into its Greek components, it means essentially poverty of the flesh, right? So that loss of what we call muscle tissue, but that's how it was kind of originally coined and followed through. What's more important is we have now a diagnostic code for it, right? We do have the ICD-10 code for sarcopenia, but that only came out about a decade ago. So in terms of comparing this to other clinical conditions, it really is on the early end of our research and understanding. So there's been a ton of great research on it. I don't want to underrepresent what we've done, but just put that in perspective of other items that we've been researching for decades, or in some cases hundreds of years. This is really on the newer end. There's 2 items that we're going to dive a little deep into in terms of how we understand how to define sarcopenia. One is going to be looking into reports from the European Working Group on Sarcopenia in Older People. You'll see that abbreviation there. They came out with a really nice consensus statement in 2019, which is really the primary operational definition we use today in the sarcopenia realm. And then just recently, a couple years ago, there was a publication by this Global Leadership Initiative in Sarcopenia, or GLIS. They use the Delphi method, right? Polling experts in an iterative process to best define what we should consider in the sarcopenia realm in terms of definitions, characteristics, and what we should not. So we have a pretty good framework now of the definition of sarcopenia, what it is, what it isn't, and how we can translate that to the clinical realm. So what is it? This was actually not the 2019 definition. This came out in 2010, same working group. But I want to show the history of how this came about. So this is no longer the primary working definition, but I think it's cool to see how we got to our current one. It started by defining 3 characteristics for sarcopenia. 1, low muscle mass, right? You could just classically think of an older adult in a hospital setting that would be smaller, bedridden, those sort of items. You say, okay, yes, we have low muscle mass. But it had to come in combination with low muscle strength or low physical performance on specific tests that define muscle strength, or a battery of performance tests. So these were 3 critical characteristics that were defined in 2010, and we do still use those 3 today, but in a slightly different priority order. This is also how we can tier the magnitude of sarcopenia or the severity of sarcopenia. As you see, our three criteria there: muscle mass, muscle strength, and then physical performance, or you can consider that muscle function. With pre-sarcopenia, so not something we would consider to be in the diagnostic realm, we have the reduction in muscle mass, but if you can maintain strength or physical function, you don't have the definition, by definition, sarcopenia. And then the difference between sarcopenia and severe sarcopenia is really just the magnitude of the reduction of strength and performance of that muscle. And again, this was the early definitions. I'm not going to dive into how we measure the different items. I think Sharon's going to talk a little bit more about the tools we have available, but I will list them out here, and you can see the reference there as well. So if you need to grab tools to either measure muscle mass, muscle strength, or the physical performance metric, the 2010 paper that's from the European Working Group is pretty outstanding in terms of providing those tools for you. But now this is really our current working definition. And the key shift we saw after we had about a decade of research from that initial report is we shifted the priority from muscle mass to muscle strength. So now really the primary criteria and defining characteristic for sarcopenia is the reduction in muscle strength. The two I have listed there is grip strength or the chair stand test. But that's really now the primary criteria. It's no longer mass. We still use muscle mass in terms of the quantity or quality to confirm the presence of sarcopenia, and then certainly we still use that physical performance measure to grade sarcopenia severity. But that was the big shift we saw in terms of the working group definition. What I'm showing here is standard muscle loss that we expect with aging, and I'm going to show you how we need to best define the difference between expected muscle loss with aging. We know as adults get older, especially past our 30s, we tend to just have a gradual decline in our muscle mass and size. That is normal, healthy aging, but when it reaches a certain functional cutoff, that's when it becomes a clinical issue. So, in general, please keep in mind, independent of sarcopenia, we have this progressive loss of muscle mass. There's data that differ in terms of the rate of progression, but this is some seminal work from the 90s that was like, hey, it's about 8% of your muscle mass per decade starting at age 40, and that accelerates after you get older as well. Certainly we have tools to dampen that, but that's classical numbers that we've historically used. What does that mean functionally? This is a cross-section of the thigh muscle. So let me grab a pointer real quick so I can clearly show this here. So you see up here in A, this is a young, healthy person's thigh muscle if you kind of just did a cross-section of it. Right in the middle here, that's the bone. So you could envision your thigh cut through the center there. Around this is all nice muscle tissue. And you can see the size of that. And you can see not a lot of white infiltrating the dark, dense area here. The white just outside that is your fat. And so we like to see this nice difference between the nice muscle tissue and then the white fat tissue. And now in B, this is your older individual. This is after those years and decades of progressive muscle loss. We not only see a smaller muscle size, you can see the whole thigh now, fat and everything fits within the size of the younger person's just lean area, indicated by the red dots on the outside here. But beyond the reduction in size, we see this infiltration of fat, this white area that's kind of coming into the dense muscle area. And that has implications for reducing muscle function as well. So it's not just this loss of size, it's also function. So I just want to highlight, hey, we do expect muscle loss with aging, but where's the concern? The concern is when that reduction in muscle strength or performance goes beyond what we would expect in the normal healthy range. And so here you can see over time muscle strength in the early years of life, so this would be teens through 20s, right? We see a nice increase in muscle strength. Our adult life, we try to maintain it, and if you have a slow reduction in muscle size over time, you can reach this area in your older life that is above this threshold of low physical performance. This is where we want our healthy individuals to be. If you have an accelerated muscle loss, you can see the slope down here, then we're hitting these concerning areas, and that's where largely our individuals with sarcopenia kind of lie. So after we defined sarcopenia, we have this consensus working group now of experts in the field. We went through this iterative Delphi process to identify, hey, what are the critical factors that we need to have in terms of our aspects of sarcopenia and how it matters in terms of the clinical presentation and outcomes. This is a nice figure from their recent paper. I do highly recommend reading this one by Kirk and colleagues down here. This is the GLIS conceptual framework. Outstanding read, really clearly defines in this beautiful figure and others the aspects of sarcopenia that we need to focus on, which is we consider it a disease of skeletal muscle tissue. Rates of sarcopenia increase with age expectedly as we have those general muscle loss items coming down. Importantly, and this is an item that they pointed out from this Delphi process, it is potentially reversible with intervention. So I will pinpoint that because I think classically this happens in the nutrition, malnutrition space as well. Sometimes we identify individuals and it's like, okay, well, there they are. We don't have anything that's very effective. I want to highlight that the experts in the field do believe this is a potentially reversible condition. Notably, and this is an important thing that came out of this group, was they clarified that our definition of sarcopenia should not change based on age or setting or otherwise. We need one standardized definition to be able to be used across variable care settings. So that was an important item coming out of this work. I'll show you why that's important because right now the data in the field is a little bit variable depending on whose definition of sarcopenia you use. I've highlighted this European working groups and the GLIS here, but I'll show you some other ones and why it's important to standardize it in the field. And as you all practitioners in the field are working on this, important to try and lean into the dominant definitions of sarcopenia in the field so we can only learn the best if we're all using the same definition and understanding of sarcopenia. And then certainly outcomes, falls, mobility limitations, poor quality of life, et cetera. Okay, so now protein energy wasting. This is the item that I don't work deeply in, but I want to kind of clarify the differences between the chronic kidney disease protein energy wasting field and the sarcopenia field. They came from different places. In general, I view the protein energy wasting definition to be more focused on the etiology and the cause of sarcopenia, especially from a nutrition standpoint. So the different criteria that have been used are similar to sarcopenia, low muscle mass, et cetera. I haven't seen as much focus on the function, which we're now finding from these recent definitions is critically important for the definition of sarcopenia. So one difference between them there. But I do like that the protein energy wasting field focuses very much on the nutritional aspect. Are people malnourished? Are they getting enough protein in? Certainly we have issues in the CKD realm where people are unable to consume or not educated well enough to consume adequate amounts of protein. So you can focus on the etiology there. But in my mind, the clinical ramification is still sarcopenia. So for those of you that are doing protein energy screening or protein energy wasting screening and work, I do highly recommend you look into utilizing the criteria for sarcopenia because you can use those diagnostic codes. Right now I know in the PEW realm, we don't have a specific diagnostic code for that. You have to use a combination of CKD and then one of the malnutrition codes. It's not specific to this unique situation of protein energy wasting in the CKD realm. So that would be my recommendation there if you're in the clinical realm and doing this. I highly recommend aligning with the sarcopenia definitions, if nothing else, so that we can get more research and clinical focus, especially in the CKD realm. All right, we talked about the clinical consequences. Prevalence is interesting. All right, let me show you this data. So this was, in my mind, one of, if not the critical works in the field that not just identified the prevalence of sarcopenia in our populations, but specifically related it to physical disability and injury. This article for sure has been cited thousands and thousands of times, and it was on older individuals in New Mexico. They profiled, what do we got here, maybe a couple thousand individuals there, and they determined the prevalence to be 13 to 24% in people that were under 70, and then up to 50% or greater in people that were over 80. So it really defined for us, hey, sarcopenia is certainly something that progresses with age. And beyond that, I really want to stress the relationships down here. All these items are related to sarcopenia greater than 3 disabilities, balance abnormality, gait abnormality, use of a cane walker. These are items that impact people's day-to-day quality of life. All of those are dramatically related with a sarcopenia. So if someone has sarcopenia, they have an extremely high risk of also having those other items. This plays towards the importance of screening, preventing, and treating sarcopenia, especially in individuals that are at higher risk, which, as Sharon will dive into, the CKD specific reasons why that population may be at high risk of sarcopenia. Now, this is what I was talking about before, where if you use different definitions of sarcopenia, we get different data in terms of what we understand about its prevalence and its clinical relationships. So what you see here is a variety of different definitions that are used to assess the exact same population. This group down here, and this came out just recently, they used a bunch of different definitions that are available and out there to screen for sarcopenia, and they tested it on the same population. You can see a nice group there, 1,760 participants in the older adult realm. And you can see a variable rate of sarcopenia between about 5 and 15%. So to me, I mean, when you're talking about a threefold difference in prevalence just based on popularity definitions, that's an issue to me from a research perspective. And to you all, it should be an issue from the clinical perspective, right? We need to make sure we're using the most accurate definition. And the better we standardize this and the more data we can get from specific definitions, I think the better. So the one I've been highlighting to you was the European Working Group definition. And you can see here that has a prevalence of about 15%, so on the higher range of the individuals there. I'll use this just to support my bias that utilizing the muscle function, muscle strength measure is critical in defining sarcopenia, but certainly the data is there for all of you to assess and kind of define what definition you find most relevant to your populations. I'll highlight this too. I know this is just kind of me typing items in here. But I use this little item down here in this study, if you want to look into it, to stress how different the prevalence of sarcopenia can be, not based on age or demographics, but based on the location of the participant. So all of these individuals have roughly the same age and demographics, but you can see if they're community dwelling, the prevalence of sarcopenia is about 25%, versus inpatient, hospital, or even institutional situations, you can see that dramatically rises. So very important to be utilizing the same definition of sarcopenia in these different areas so that we can make sure we have the best understanding of it. Okay, so now that we've talked about what sarcopenia is, I want to talk a little bit more about the physiology behind the development of sarcopenia. So this would be largely our skeletal muscle physiology. Protein turnover, right? Our muscles are primarily made of structurally, our protein. It's the largest organ in the body that takes up about 40% of our mass. It is incredibly useful for maintaining metabolic health over time. So although I don't dive into the metabolic health and risks in people with sarcopenia, just know that your muscle tissue is the primary site for insulin-stimulated glucose disposal, right? So when people eat meals and they need to dispose of the glucose from their meals, most of that in healthy individuals goes into their muscle. When the muscle function on the metabolic end declines, what you have is you have elevated rates of glucose in the blood, and that increases your risk for type 2 diabetes and otherwise. So keep that in mind. Now, the important part here is that the muscle tissue is really our body's primary reservoir for protein, right? So, we have the 3 macronutrients that we get energy from, right? Proteins, carbs, fats. Our carbohydrate stores and our fat stores are highly malleable, right? We can have large changes in our carbohydrate stores percentage-wise, right? You can see your glycogen going from near 100% down to 50 or less in a very short period of time. For our fat tissue, we have people fluctuate, 50 to 100 kilograms over the course of a couple years in fat tissue if they're having dramatic weight gains or weight loss, if you think about after bariatric surgery. Muscle tissue does not change nearly to the same magnitude. It's very difficult to make it move at that level. So if you think of even your most profound bodybuilders, right, they will have a muscle gain of about 5 to 10 kilograms in a whole year compared to what we can mobilize in terms of our fat stores, where you can do 5 to 10 kilograms in a couple months. So there's a big difference there in the malleability of those tissues. Now, why is this important? So we can't just eat extra protein and have it stored in our body so that when we don't have it or when we need extra sources, our body can just build from that. What it has to do is it has to tear down our muscle tissue. And that is a difficult thing to be able to rebuild. So this is where I'm going to take the moment and just that basic background of muscle physiology to stress. One of the critical ways to address sarcopenia is really early screening and prevention. If we prevent the muscle wasting, it's a lot easier to prevent the loss than it is to have loss and then try and rebuild the muscle that was already lost due to how difficult it is to store that. You can't just eat more protein and then have it build into your muscle. Beyond that, how does protein turnover work, right? If we're talking about our muscle tissue, although I said it's not highly malleable from a large scale perspective, if you look down to the minuscule scale, our muscles are actually very variable on an hour-to-hour basis, right? Over the course of a single day, we go through elevated rates of protein synthesis, abbreviated here as MPS, muscle protein synthesis. That's when your body is taking up amino acids from your foods and building it directly into your muscles. So right now, if you guys ate within the last hour or two, your muscles are growing, and they are getting bigger right now, just on a really, really tiny scale, right? When you're fasting, especially overnight or in between meals, your muscles are breaking down, again, at a very minuscule scale. But when you talk about doing this over days and weeks and years and decades, the difference between our synthesis rates and our breakdown rates are really what dictates our whole body muscle size. So the image I have here is kind of just what that cyclical change in muscle protein balance looks like over the course of a day, right? So the green areas are when your muscle's building, the red areas are when your muscle's breaking down. At the end of the day, if everything's nice and even, we call it a zero net balance, or that would be, someone in their 30s who's maxed out their muscle size, they're just going day to day, they're not losing muscle just yet, they're nice and steady. If breakdown rates supersede those synthesis rates, then you have the loss of muscle mass and vice versa. Now, all right, the concept from this figure didn't come from me. This is beautifully done by some protein synthesis researchers, Stu Phillips and Chris McGlory out of McMaster. I tried to replicate the concept, but I'm not very artistic. I know it looks like I have X's on the bottom there. That's supposed to be a meal, right? So that's a fork and a knife kind of crisscrossed. So what this is supposed to depict is when you have a meal, your body starts protein synthesis, and that goes on for a couple hours, and then you're in the fasted state, and your body starts protein breakdown. And then you have another meal, and your body starts protein synthesis, and then breakdown. So that's what this general image is trying to depict. I'm going to come back to this image a couple times, so I want to make sure that's just reasonably well understood in the concept of what that image is. Okay, so what do we know about the protein synthesis and breakdown rates and muscle loss? What are the factors that really dictate the net balance? What we found is that really elevated muscle breakdown, although that would be the intuitive answer, hey, if you have more breakdown, you're losing muscle, is not actually what dictates whether or not someone loses muscle over time. It's whether they have blunted synthesis rates or not. So when people have reduced rates of growth, that tends to be the dominant factor that changes in terms of whether or not their net balance changes, right? So what does that mean? That means the protein synthesis version of that is the item that we expect to be most variable from someone that is young, healthy, gaining muscle. Their synthesis rates are higher in response to food or other stimuli. People that are losing muscle, their synthesis rates are lower. They may have even breakdown rates over the course of a day, but that reduction in synthesis really seems to be the defining factor. One study, just to exemplify that, published here, although there's several like this in the literature, is on an immobilized limb. So we know when we take muscle and we stop it from moving at all, right? You put people in a cast or sit them on a bed, muscle tends to degrade very, very quickly. So they did this in these individuals. They immobilized their limbs, and they measured both synthesis and breakdown rates. So what you can see here, this is the muscle protein synthesis graph. In the control setting, you can see their rates right here. And these asterisks here are that synthesis rates were significantly reduced when we immobilized the muscle, suggesting, as I mentioned, synthesis rates are what's changed. When we look at breakdown rates did not change significantly at all. You see some variability in there, but average over time, if you look at breakdown, there's no change. That's primarily to say, hey, synthesis is the item that changes there. What's even more cool is when you look at this graph over here, this looks at the difference between the fasted and fed states. So even though I kind of made it a dichotomous image where okay, we have synthesis at this time and breakdown at that time. No, both processes are running. It's just one is on more than another, right? If you think of them not as on-off, but as total rates. So what's cool here is in the fasted versus fed condition, the control individuals, they have this baseline measure of protein synthesis in the fasted state, and the immobilized version has the same exact level. So when they're fasted, synthesis rates are the same. It's in response to the meal that dictates the primary difference in these individuals. So if you look at the control, when they are fed, their synthesis rates dramatically increase. In the immobilized arm here, the synthesis rates don't change from fed to fasted. So it's not just differences in breakdown and synthesis rates, it's differences in response to anabolic stimuli in the ability for synthesis to increase. And this is me just being kind of nerdy about muscle protein synthesis and turnover, but I find that really interesting that we can actually tell the difference not just in synthesis or breakdown, but it's the response. To my mind, I'm a dietitian, so my bias is food. It's the response to food that differs between individuals when they're losing muscle. So that's our current understanding of the protein synthesis and breakdown physiology defining turnover. It's so cool. All right. So we use stable isotopic tracers. There's different ways people can do it. You can either put tracers in food products. So that basically means we have a little tag on amino acids, and it's either in your food itself, you feed it to people, and then what you do is you take biopsies of the tissue in the body that you're interested to see where that food goes. And you also do arteriovenous differences in the blood going in and out of that tissue. So you put tracer in the body, you measure blood in and out of a tissue, we'll call it just the thigh muscle. You can see the tracer that goes in and the tracer that comes out, and you can get rates of the difference between the synthesis rates. So if you have more tracer going into the muscle than coming out, you know that the tracer has to go in and then be built into the muscle. If you then take a biopsy of that muscle tissue, you can actually pull out the muscle tissue and find your tracer built into that tissue itself. Now, there was an awesome paper. You guys have all heard the adage, you are what you eat. You know what I mean, right? And we all kind of know that. It's so true, and we're finding out more and more and more. It's more true than we ever thought. There was an awesome article. If you get a chance to, these days you can Google it up. Luc Van Loon, awesome protein synthesis researcher, he published a paper titled, You Are What You Eat recently. And what they actually did was they defined when we feed people a protein meal, it shows up in their muscle tissue within hours. So we actually know exactly when you eat food, that protein synthesis from those exact proteins and amino acids in your food are showing up in your muscle within hours. And that to me was just kind of the coolest thing as a nutrition person, to be able to say, hey, no, what you're eating right now is now a part of your body. And so that's kind of how we measure it.
Does it matter where you take that biopsy? Like, is it assumed that it's the same, like in your calf, as your thigh, in your bicep, as your face muscle?
Yeah. That's a great question. It does matter if you exercise the different tissue. So, for example, they've done studies where they'll split people and they'll exercise one of their legs and not the other, and you will have different rates of synthesis based on the leg that exercised, right? So it does matter in that sense. In the whole body sense, I got to imagine there's a difference, but I haven't seen anyone profile. I don't know. Is the shoulder synthesis rates different from the quad? The quad is easy because it's large, and so even on sarcopenic individuals, like classically, it's very easy for us to get in there and take a piece of muscle tissue. If you haven't seen muscle biopsies, I should have brought a picture of it. If you can think of like the old pencils that you used to use in grade school, we use a needle that is about exactly the size of a pencil that would go in. We numb it out. I see a face. We numb it up. Don't worry. we numb the area. And we poke it in a little bit, and then what we take out is about the size of an eraser. So if you think of the back of that little pencil, that's about the size of the muscle tissue that we take out of there. Then we homogenize it, put it in all sorts of different experiments. If you're doing cool cell culture work, we can actually take that muscle tissue, put it in a petri dish, grow it, and do the same sort of experiments that we do in a human in the petri dish as well. So like there's cool work. If you ever heard of the hyperinsulinemic euglycemic clamp, it's basically just infusing glucose and insulin into the human body, taking a muscle biopsy, growing the muscle in a petri dish, and putting glucose and insulin into the petri dish. And so you can match what's going on at the cellular level with the whole body. So yeah, all this tracer work and protein turnover stuff is just really neat, yeah.
Quick question on the day that was exercising. Was it before the meal or after? Did it matter? Did it look at it?
So we could give a whole talk on the impact of exercise on protein turnover. In terms of the bilateral stuff, I'm not exactly sure. I do know when we look at the anabolic response to food with exercise, we generally test the anabolic response to food after the exercise. And it tends to stay elevated for about 24 to 48 hours. So we used to have this classic thinking of like this anabolic window, right? You exercise, and then there's all the third party, you gotta have a protein shake within 30 minutes or you're not gonna build your muscle. It turns out that timing is not really relevant. Muscle protein synthesis responses after exercise will stay elevated for 1 to 2 days, basically. Yeah. Great question.
So you were taught that one, where the arrows were up with synthesis and degradation. Many of our dialysis patients tell us that they only eat once a day. What kind of impact does that make?
Yeah, so this is, all right, hold on, let me jump to a slide, because you're asking a perfectly direct question. Oh, maybe I didn't have it in here. Okay, so this is what I get for not paying attention to the slides I put in here. All right, so I will answer your question, and then I'll go back to the presentation. It does make a difference, because we used to think, hey, if you're not eating every 4 to 5 hours, you're not able to get the adequate synthesis rates over time. You only have one time to do it. And so the thought used to be, hey, unless you're eating 30 grams of protein over the course of a day, you're not going to have adequate muscle protein synthesis. That was true until a couple years ago. There was a group that took young, lean, healthy individuals, and they gave them a ton of protein at once. So instead of 3 33-gram protein meals, they gave them one 100-gram protein meal at one time. And you know what they found out? Over the course of the whole day, the net protein synthesis rates was exactly the same as if they had the protein throughout the day. So I would say up until a couple years ago, I would have been up here and I would have answered, it's a huge issue. Their synthesis rates are definitely down if they're only eating once a day. But as long as they're eating enough protein, it seems like it would be okay. The problem is going to be if they're eating one meal and it's a small meal and they're not getting 100 grams of protein in that meal, which I'm guessing they're not, now you have the issue of, no, their synthesis rates are never going to be able to compensate for that reduced protein intake. So it depends on the amount of protein in that meal. Yeah.
Is that true in the elderly as well?
So there's a whole other. All right. So now I will skip ahead here. No. This is great. No, this is exactly like this is to me. This is the best kind of way to do these talks, right? Because you have things that you guys are interested in, and I just like talking about nutrition. So to me, it's all the same. All right, so I'm going to show this slide. Oh, this is with exercise. All right, so let me start here, and then it'll help answer your question. So we were talking about exercise and the response to exercise. If you remember the graph I showed you before, the dotted lines are from the graph I showed you before, where synthesis rates and breakdown rates were roughly equivalent. When you do exercise and add that with protein, what you can do is you can lightly change the breakdown rates, but you significantly impact the protein synthesis rates. So each one of those green bars are now up and beyond what would normally happen in someone that doesn't exercise and doesn't eat adequate protein. So that's what happens in the healthy setting. Now, this goes to the potential resistance to that protein synthesis. I have it here with a question mark because I have not seen direct research in people with chronic kidney disease to suggest that this is true, but we've seen this in other clinical conditions. So I'm going to put this here with the caveat that we don't have direct RCT evidence and muscle biopsies in people with CKD to say this is true, but as someone that knows the field and sees how similar these items are, I'm going to answer your question as if it is true, but just know that it's not perfectly well defined. What we see here is the individuals will likely have a reduced stimulus effect in response to their meals, and this may be even if you add exercise on top of that. So not only does CKD come with items that Sharon will talk about, such as inflammation, that may increase those breakdown rates, which I did say isn't the primary factor, but it's still a factor. Beyond that, those individuals may not be able to respond to the meals the same way a healthy person would. And so you have this issue which, even if you can get them to eat 3 meals a day and have adequate protein, do they have the physiologic ability to adequately respond to protein synthesis rates? That's what we don't know. Given the prevalence of increased risk of sarcopenia in this population that Sharon will dive into, I would venture to say probably not. But again, that's a little bit of speculation and talking beyond the data. But I do just want to share that with you all because I do think it's likely the case. But again, we need more clear data to really verify that. Let's see. So let's see where I want to go here. All right, let me do this real quick. I'm not going to go into this too much because this is really a transition over to Sharon's talk. But these are the various items within chronic kidney disease that may impact the muscle physiology that we had discussed about protein synthesis and protein breakdown. I have several references in there. Some of them are perspectives and reviews. So just, full disclosure and clarity. I tried to highlight when it was preclinical data. Let me see if okay, so example up here, uremic toxins, right? We have that, this may disrupt protein turnover pathways. All these items here may lead to a net muscle loss by negatively impacting synthesis or increasing breakdown. But I want to highlight, for example, uremic toxins. This is from preclinical data. Here's the reference. I believe this one was in C. elegans. Down here, metabolic acidosis. This was preclinical data. I believe this was in rats. Don't quote me on that. That's the same reference there. Okay, so yeah, so that may be a review that kind of has those items in there. So anyway, keep that in mind. Same thing down here, insulin resistance, preclinical data. We need more direct research in people with CKD to truly understand if these items are directly related. I would say, we can do like a triangulation sort of thing, right? We have enough data that's preclinical and enough data that's clinical and enough data that's epidemiologic that we can kind of mesh it together. But this is science, so like kind of meshing together doesn't really work. So I'll stress that we need more research in this realm, and I'll let Sharon talk a little bit more about the implications that may have. But anyway, I think this is a pretty good list of the different factors relevant to CKD that impact sarcopenia risk or protein turnover or otherwise. So we talked about exercise positive effects, talked about CKD anabolic resistance. This is the same, okay, all right, I do want to highlight this point down here. So I had mentioned the importance of prevention, and if we're screening people and if they are, have pre-sarcopenia or sarcopenia, we need to address them. The healthcare system in the US, not to get political or anything, but it's not great, right? We know that the healthcare system, and that's bipartisan, right, across boards, it's not great. What it is great for whatever reason, it is awesome for dietitians right now. Dietitian coverage is phenomenal. And if you have dietitians that have been doing medical nutrition therapy for CKD and they're not using the new preventative nutrition codes to get more hours with their patients, come talk to me. There are workarounds that we have in the clinical setting. You will get healthcare reimbursement. We're seeing roughly 16 to 20 hours per year, which lets you see people on, at minimum, a monthly or sometimes bi-weekly basis. So if you have issues in that realm, come talk to me. The other issue that we see is like dietitian-limited time. Telehealth RDs are awesome right now. We have a ton in Louisiana. So if you're a Louisiana practitioner and you need connections to Louisiana dietitians that will treat CKD patients, let me know. I will connect you. All that to say, CKD stage 3 to me looks like the most impactful time to be able to address the sarcopenia risk. Now, I have Melanie sitting down here. I was talking with Melanie before because she deals with CKD a lot more than I do. And this is new to me. Hey, the CKD 3 realm is where we have a time to prevent people from getting to dialysis. And so, man, not only can you impact them getting to dialysis, but you can impact them getting to sarcopenia and mobility. It just seems like such a critical time. And the approach, lifestyle-wise, is, as we've talked about, nutrition, right? Having your food so that you get that optimal protein synthesis response, and exercise. And you know who can do that? Like registered dietitians. So that's just my little promo for the profession, and to use people in the profession, especially at a time now when, for whatever reason, we have great healthcare coverage for dietitians. All right, I've got a couple minutes left here. Let me dive into 2 items that are just early research areas. So don't look at this and apply it to your patients right now. I have 2 items. One's a supplement, one's a food, that may impact sarcopenia/protein turnover in CKD patients. And again, this is early pilot work on both ends, but I thought it was really cool. So we talked about the list of items that may negatively impact protein turnover, and metabolic acidosis was one of them. Bicarbonate supplementation, a very simple, cheap dietary supplement. Give that to participants. You can see here they gave it to them for just 6 weeks. 2-week times they did escalating doses. You can see the bicarb levels did increase in their blood. Okay, we're giving them the supplement. It shows up in their blood. The important thing is down here. In just 6 weeks, we are seeing significant or near significant improvements in functional measures and strength. The only thing dietary supplement-wise that have ever come close to this is creatine supplementation in healthy individuals. Creatine is like the most impactful, positive dietary supplement for improving muscle size and strength, right? That works in healthy individuals. In CKD, I have not seen any data like this that will improve strength and function in such a short period of time. Although this is pilot work, this is exciting to me because it's directly addressing an item, the metabolic acidosis in CKD, and impacting the functional measures that are negatively hurt by having sarcopenia. So anyway, an area to keep an eye on, and if any of you do clinical research, I'd love to talk about study design or whatever in that area, because I think it's very, very cool and has a high potential. This other one this is my work, and I have it up here because I'm up here so I get to talk about it, and I think it's cool. When we talk about protein turnover and muscle protein synthesis and breakdown, we always talk about protein. It's the most impactful. We talked about it at every level today, right? Some work that I did was a feeding study in giving people equal amounts of protein over the day, but one group had whole grains and one group had refined grains. Normally, whole grains come with more protein. We normalized that in the study. But what we did was we fed people a whole grain or refined grain diet, even protein between them, and we measured net protein balance. So not the synthesis breakdown at every meal, but at the end of the day, what was their net difference there? What we found, I thought was really cool, was interesting. In the fasted state, the whole grain diet actually had worse net balance when they were fasted. So that was like, okay, that's a little weird. I don't know why. It is small magnitude-wise. You can kind of see it there. But their net balance or their breakdown rates were greater than their synthesis rates in the fasted state. What I thought was awesome is when we gave them food and we measured protein balance in the fed state. If you remember, some slides I showed before, was one of the main differences between whether muscle is being gained or lost is the response to meals, right? Someone's protein synthetic response to the fed state. On the whole grain diet, the individuals in the fed state had a net balance that was significantly higher than the refined grain diet. We did some cell culture work. We took items in whole grains, little phytonutrients, and we put it on muscle cells, and we showed increased rates of protein synthesis there as well. So to me, I'm a big food is medicine sort of guy. I think there's a large potential for non-protein nutrients and foods to positively impact whole body protein turnover. Another area this may come up is the ultra-processed food realm. I think there's the potential that maybe ultra-processed foods could have the negative effect, right, having a negative effect on protein turnover. Anyway, so a little quick plug for that sort of work. All right, key takeaways. Loss of muscle strength is really one of the defining factors of sarcopenia. In my mind, the European Working Group definition is, or should be one of the, if not the most predominant one, and so that's their primary function there. Prevalence of sarcopenia is higher when you get older. It varies by setting, and it is exacerbated by clinical conditions such as CKD, and we talked about some potential mechanisms as to why that may happen. The defining underlying muscle physiology that dictates gain or loss is that muscle protein turnover. We talked about synthesis being the primary driver of whether net balance changes, and some biological rationales behind there. Oh, I didn't talk about the VIVE study. All right, sorry, I'm out of time. But there's some really cool trials on feeding protein and doing exercise. What's the main takeaway? All right, the main takeaway I'll touch on here. I didn't do the slides for the VIVE trial. It's an awesome study. Older adults, specifically people that are mobility limited, so they're at risk for having sarcopenia in that range, right? They're older, they're less mobile than the average person. Study gave them exercise and nutrition or various combinations of that and studied, hey, does exercise plus nutrition give them the best benefit on their outcomes, right? And everything I've showed you, you'd be like, yeah, obviously, this is great, right? Exercise, nutrition, synergistically, that's going to be the best. It wasn't. It was determined from those studies that exercise was really the dominant factor in individuals that were mobility limited. So if they gave them just nutrition on its own right and didn't give them exercise, what do you have? You don't have the same stimulus. So for mobility limited adults, which in my mind is extremely applicable to the sarcopenia setting, I want to use this to stress, even though I'm a nutrition guy and I love the importance of nutrition and I'm a food is medicine person, for that population, exercise is hypercritical. And the VIVE study really showed us how important exercise is in the treatment of individuals with sarcopenia, both for prevention and treatment, even though they didn't study sarcopenia explicitly. Okay, and then CKD3 may be a potential preventative window. And all right, Sharon, I'm ready to hand it over to you. Sorry, I went a little long there.
That's good.
Oh, and I popped out. All right, okay, should be good here.
Your enthusiasm is so welcome, and your experience in sharing all that data was great. So I want to tell you how I got here. So at our CRN of Rochester and of upstate New York, we have an annual Council of Renal Nutrition meeting, and our topic was sarcopenia. And Dr. Steve Silver gave this excellent presentation on sarcopenia and kidney disease. And then we had a physical therapist speak. And we didn't have a nutritionist. So when Judy joined the committee, everyone thought the sarcopenia was a great topic for a national meeting. She couldn't get Dr. Silver to speak because his wife was there, and she said, "You can't go," which is true. Is that not true? And she asked a few other people, and then I agreed to speak, although I want to just say out loud that I'm not an expert in sarcopenia, so I want you to interpret this as what the registered dietitian in the renal unit does and what tools are available to them to get things moving, because after all, most of us have over 100 patients, and you have to be quick on your feet to do that kind of thing. So that's what I wanted to just make sure you know where I'm coming from. So it's great to have an expert with us. Okay. And then we were going to do a polling tool whether I have osteoporosis or sarcopenia, because I'm shrinking and because I'm approaching 70. And if you look at the statistics for muscle breakdown, they accelerate at 70. I didn't include that slide, but it does exist. Okay. So let's go. Okay. So I have no financial relationships. I think I have to say that for us to get CME credits. And then, oh, wait a minute. Hold on. There we go. And these are the learning objectives. And I'll just go through them, describe and we're going to overlap a little bit. Describe the unique mechanisms by which CKD drives malnutrition and sarcopenia. I'm going to spend more time on applying validated screening and diagnostic tools, including GLIM criteria, which is the Global Leadership Initiative on Malnutrition, like Dr. May or Jake spoke about. That's key in all the literature. And the European Working Group on Sarcopenia in older people. We're also going to evaluate the tension between protein restriction and protein adequacy, and that's why we get into trouble with kidney disease, and individualized nutrition and physical activity recommendations using the new buzzword, precision nutrition framework. So we want to stay current. Okay, since we're talking about renal and we have to define what we do, this is a little history about CKD staging. So the original NKF staging was was just in terms of GFR, and it's actually all new in my lifetime of treatment that GFR is on the labs. It used to only be creatinine, and we're still always constantly trying to encourage primary care docs to recognize kidney disease. Because the creatinine, which they do, is a geometric progression. I have to just give my little plug for that. So when the creatinine is doubled, you've already lost 50% of your kidney function. Probably everyone in this room knows that, so I'm preaching to the choir. Okay. Oh, you're welcome. So there's the 5 stages, and then it was changed in 2012 to include the cause of kidney disease, the GFR, and albuminuria, and it got more complicated. Okay. And for the purpose of this talk, we're just talking about stage 3, and that we're not diving down. Okay, so I'm just going to gloss over this. At our lecture, Dr. Silver gave the entire lecture was really about how inflammation affects kidney disease, and it was in great detail. So CKD, and that's the take-home message, because inflammation also comes in later with the diagnosis of malnutrition, which is a big deal. So defining what we're talking about with sarcopenia and malnutrition is ongoing and a big deal. So chronic kidney disease is characterized by a persistent low-grade systemic inflammation, mainly beginning at stage 3. There's inflammatory cytokines. So I'm not really, I tried to get the simplified version of inflammation. We'll talk about it a little bit later. But there they are, IL-6, TNF, and CRP. Inflammation drives much of the protein catabolism via the, I should never use things that I can't pronounce, protease pathway, and elevated inflammatory markers correlate directly with severity of muscle wasting and malnutrition. However, where we come in is inflammation suppresses appetite, impairs nutrient absorption, and accelerates protein energy wasting. And I do want to tell you that there is I listened to this YouTube by Dr. Higazi, and I included it. I must have listened to it 20 times. It's dated now. It's from 6 years ago, but the concepts of the definitions and the inflammation are loud and strong. And so he proposes that for the absorption of nutrients, that it changes in inflammation, and it goes from using glucose to protein and fat. So that is the simplified one. I have been advised not to go there because on the cellular level, it's very different. So to say that is sort of stretching what many mechanisms that there are. So I just want you to appreciate that as we go forward. And but it does suppress appetite and accelerates protein energy wasting. And then clinical implication is that if you have a patient, this is the take-home message, if you got kidney disease, you have inflammation. And we're going to come back to that time and time again, because there's different ways of having malnutrition. Okay, so CKD1, stage 1, you're basically out of the woods, unless you have the comorbidities that come with kidney disease. So what are they? They are diabetes, they are hypertension, they are cardiovascular disease. So those things have their own factors for inflammation. So what is also contributing is how well the diseases are being treated, to how inflamed they are. So usually 1 and 2, they're not that at risk, but they're not out of the woods. That's the take-home message. Okay. Now, nutritional risk escalates with stage 3. And here you could see protein energy wasting prevalence, which we'll get to in more detail, going up with the different stages. And stage 5 is highest at 44%. And the inflammatory risk increases as the stages go up. And what the RD does is frequently monitor, which we do all the time. And if many people who come here to these meetings work in hemodialysis, although with the great health reimbursement, I didn't appreciate, there's more dietitians seeing people in the office. So they have a real opportunity for prevention. So this is sort of saying a similar thing, so I'll go over it. The uremic symptoms, what do we face with our hemodialysis patients? Anorexia, nausea, dysgeusia, fatigue directly impact intake. And each comorbidity, I said, but it can't be repeated often enough. The kidney diet restrictions, hello, this is the big thing now. Do we use them or do we not? And so let's look at the side slide. So for hypertension, it's low sodium food. So we know how low sodium food tastes. And diabetes, frequently there's carbohydrate counting and control. And then the heart failure is, again, fluid restriction and low sodium. And the hemodialysis schedule. Hemodialysis takes the whole day, right? I mean, it's 4 hours on the machine, an hour to get there, waiting because they're always late, then they're waiting for transportation. They're lucky if they get a meal in a day. And even in peritoneal dialysis, the patients often don't like to eat a big meal before they fill because they get too full, so that's very impactful as well. And in the PD clinic, the first thing we ask is, how does the food taste? Does it taste the way it's supposed to taste? So these are basic things that prohibit eating or eating with pleasure, because until you yourself has lost your appetite, you don't appreciate how impactful appetite is, because people who have an appetite cannot really understand why the patient is not eating. Oh, you can eat this, you can eat that. It doesn't work. And so there you have many factors of why intake can be impaired in a dialysis patient. And the prevalence of sarcopenia increases with stages, so we said that already. Okay. So I want to speak a little bit about this GLIM, which is the global, whatever I said it was, but it's the leadership in malnutrition. So, actually, dialysis, kidney disease is leap years ahead of other specialties because we have a named malnutrition for the inflammation that's present. Protein energy wasting, and the references on the slide and in the back references, and that's from the International Society of Nutrition and Renal Metabolism, and that's a lot of work by Dr. Kalantar Zeta and Dr. Folk. And that has multiple factors, 4 factors of why patients have malnutrition. And you have to have 3 out of those 4 factors. I'm going to look at my notes later to get that exactly for you because I don't have the slides. But I want to talk about this GLIM because the sarcopenia literature talks about it tremendously. And, okay. So protein energy wasting actually can exist with malnutrition because it also appreciates the inflammation that kidney failure patients have. So a recent study used the nomenclature malnutrition/PEW because they wanted to be consistent with that. So the goal is to have a uniform terminology, uniform messaging, and uniform clinical action across all specialties. So let's go see what it is. So, wait, I have to go back. So, I'm sorry, I thought I had a slide on the, what?
You okay?
Yeah, I'm good. So we're gonna go on, I think the slide is gonna show up. So I'm fumbling, but that happens. Let me just see if I have that on here. Oh, here it is. I don't know why, it'll come back, okay. So then let's go to diagnosing sarcopenia. So this I really wanted to go over because I'm going to go through each one. So I want to emphasize that this diagnosis of sarcopenia is based on 4 steps, just like Jake or Dr. May said. So first you screen for risk, and we have the SARC-F questionnaire. and the SARC-F questionnaire we could use. But I wonder if the people who said they know about sarcopenia, if they use it in their clinics, because I asked our physical therapists and no one has used it. But in the literature, it's promoted as an easy-to-use tool. And it's self-administered, and any care team member can use it. And the other thing it's all about strength. So the emphasis on strength cannot be underestimated. It's just jumps out at you in the literature. And muscle mass is only used for confirmation. The other thing they use for confirmation is calf circumference, which is relatively easy to use. The other tool, the bioelectrical impedance analysis and the DEXA, can also confirm the diagnosis of sarcopenia, because you want to show that you have less muscle mass, but the DEXA is a clinical tool, and it is a clinical tool for assessing osteoporosis, but it's not really used in a nutrition assessment setting, and that's why you would do muscle circumference, which is quite easy to do. And ASMI is your, but I forgot is your skeletal muscle, your arms, so arms and legs. So that's why you can use calf circumference. And the severity of the physical performance is your gait speed or your chair to stand test. I didn't outline what those are, but they're easily available online and in the resources. So sarcopenia is easy to diagnose. And these are the 5 questions that there are. Let's start with the top. How much difficulty lifting and carrying 10 pounds? So the patient answers this. How much difficulty walking across a room? How much difficulty transferring from a chair or a bed? How much difficulty climbing a flight of stairs? And how many times have you fallen in the past? So if you have greater than 4, that's a positive assessment. And this can be, administered by anybody. But I actually am embarrassed that I don't have data to show who is doing it, but I can tell you our physical therapists are not in our clinic. So what is our role, the renal dietitian's role in sarcopenia? It is to observe our weight and dry weight trend at every visit, which we do by default, right? We do that. We always are optimizing protein intake because it's adequate protein is the foundation of muscle preservation. Now, I'm biased because I work in hemodialysis, so we're always pushing protein. But the question of the protection of protein is really for that stage 3, when you're trying to toss and decide what you're going to do. Encourage physical activity as tolerated. Even small increases matter. So sometimes you just want a patient to get out of the chair, like every time there's a new TV program on. Why don't you try that? Anything to get them to move, because they don't really move. So since I was doing this talk, I started asking our PD patients, and I was quite surprised to find out that 3 of them had those mobile peddlers that they had on a chair, that you attach to the chair, and that there's even an electric one that automatically keeps going. So doing this talk was also a testimony to learning new things. Even though I sound a little choppy, that's why we have Dr. May here for backup. And for all of you to attend, what value you bring. And then the hand grip strength, which I meant to take a picture and I never did. That is done with a dynamometer, right, and a grip, and it's very easy to use, and it's a good tool. and it takes no time, and you don't have to, like doing skin fold, the patient has to undress, and they never want to do it, and you have to do it 3 times. It's a very good, reliable skill. Okay, and then you have your calf circumference. So, okay. Next. Here, this slide is out of order. This is what I was looking for. This is Dr. Hagazi wrote an excellent paper, which I included in the references at the end, in 2024, about discussing how you come to the diagnosis of malnutrition. So there's 2 phenotypes, and then 3 phenotypes and 2 etiologies. And you need from one, like ordering food, 1 from each group. Okay? So let's go through that. These are the patients. Let's start with the bottom. Etiology on the bottom. It's bolded, chronic disease with inflammation. So every kidney disease patient you see automatically has inflammation. So you just need 1 more. And you ask them, how is your appetite? Have you lost weight? If they've lost weight, immediately they're screened for malnutrition and chronic kidney disease according to the GLIM criteria. So you just have to start acting immediately. And he's very eloquent in both his video, the YouTube, and in his writing about how that works. And then you can measure the low BMI. That's for sarcopenic obesity. You can have someone be obese and still have low protein, observable physical signs of malnutrition, and reduced muscle mass, again, by the BIA DEXA or calf circumference. Okay, so now we're just going to go into nutritional monitoring. This is some repetition, but we have used the dry weight, and when we use dry weight, we have to worry about fluid shifts and edema, weight change trends, greater than 5% in 3 months or 10% over time is significant. Their dietary intake, we're tasked with doing it annually and as as needed. So we have the 3-day food record recall is preferred. I didn't spend as much time with these detailed dietary record tools, because I think we're all equipped as dietitians to know what they are. The serum albumin is another big thing that I think is having a sea change in the literature. So what is serum albumin good for? How many dietitians have been called out? The albumin is low. Have you told them about protein and they have to eat protein? Has anyone had that experience? Like it's your fault that their albumin is low and you just say yes? But serum albumin is an indicator of morbidity and mortality. It is exquisite for that. And it is a good indicator of inflammation. I think we're trending to the fact that it is not necessarily an indicator of protein intake, but probably the dietitians believe that. Not the doctors yet. So that's something we have to do. But it does mean, like if you have a patient with a low albumin and they're eating well, maybe they have something else going on, like rheumatoid arthritis, or they have kidney disease. I don't know what, but we try. Okay? And then we have the MPCR, which is a dietary protein intake proxy, and that's really valid only in stable patients. And then those of you who remember the pocket guide for nutrition assessment, those little pink books, because everything is online now. Linda McCann was the editor for that book. And we all went through a lot of training for subjective global assessment. And now we can just look at physical signs of that on a lot of the nutrition assessment forms. And then the other thing is the malnutrition screening test. 2 questions, weight loss and appetite. So a lot of patients qualify for that, so people can act early on that. And this is the malnutrition screening tool. So basically, it does show you how it's graded, but you only need 2 things to qualify: not eating and losing weight, or some appetite malformation. Okay. And then the serum parameters, the table, I kind of went over that. And also serum phosphorus. I think low phosphorus is a much more exquisite indicator of PO intake. So when the doctor is all happy that the patient's phosphorus is 5 and it's always been 8 or 9, and you say, well, they stopped eating, it's not really a good sign. So, and also, as dietitians, at least in the hemo unit and the PD units, you have to be a detective. You can't ever accept a value at face value. You have to go, well, have they been to their hemo treatments? What if they skip a treatment? A good renal dietitian knows that they have to look how often they come to their treatments, if their treatments are for their full treatments, if the blood flow is right. It's not like easy, let's look at the labs. You have to do all that detective work to keep that value. And that's the art form of being a dietitian in the hemo unit, and even in the PD unit too, when labs are skewed. Someone came in with a K of 6. How could it be 6? Well, he didn't do his treatments for 2 days. So there you go. So that is underlying all these lab values that you use for any important clinical message. So the potassium we discussed, and the low potassium is also pretty indicative of a low PO intake, much better than albumin. I think those 2 are really key. The interdialytic weight gains, the dry weight trends, and the NPCR. Okay. All right, so this is my slide because he stole the best question. I said, what am I going to do? All right, so a 74-year-old male hemodialysis patient has been on your caseload for 2 years. His BMI is 27 and is stable. His potassium and phosphorus are within target range. He tells you he's eating well. However, over the past 4 months, his dry weight has quietly dropped 3 kilos, and he is moving more slowly when he walks to his chair. What is your clinical concern? So first I have to qualify that his BMI can't be stable if he lost weight. But anyhow, so what is your answer? I can't see. Okay. So the answer is, could someone read it for me? What? Oh, I think there's right. Right, he shows clinical signs of sarcopenia. So this is what we do. First, we recognize, document the change in dry weight, gait, and clinical concern in the care plan. Name and why it matters. Naming the change makes it actionable for the team. And those are the references. Communicate, notify the kidney doctor, the nephrologist, share the dry weight trend and mobility concerns. Sarcopenia is a team diagnosis, not just a dietitian-only call, but you are the action person to get it started. Refer to physical therapy. And resistance training is the strongest intervention for muscle preservation. So you really want to start cracking on it. So someone on your team has to reach out and have a liaison with physical therapy, so we can get started with that. The Kidney Foundation on their website has chair exercises. You can use anything to get people started to do that. The other thing is, you just have to get people moving, and it's really, I think, an effort to do this, because people think they're on dialysis, they're tired, they're fatigued, they're tired after hemo, they don't want to exercise, but you really have to catch them at the start. What I was going to say is that in the early, about 10, 15 years ago, there was a lot of using those bicycles in the hemo unit. So the KDOQI guidelines and the KDIGO guidelines, which the KDOQI commentary also support, they support aerobic exercise as well as part of the treatment. Okay, so I want you to know that. Because there was a flurry of exercise and physical activity in those early days with the exercise bikes. And someone is speaking, I'm not going to be here, on physical activity in CKD on tomorrow afternoon. That should be very telling if you're all interested to go. Let's see, how am I doing in time? I can't see Judy.
5 minutes.
Okay, here goes speed. All right, so the dietary protein recommendations in CKD, how they have evolved, they're all on the low side, between 0.6 and 0.8. And then when people are metabolically stable, they're 1.1 to 1.2. So we defer to KDOQI for that. So that's what we know. In all my years of practice, I have never had anyone on keto analogs. Has anyone had people on keto analogs? It's always in the literature. And then I have had a few people who have followed 0.6, and they come to dialysis malnourished, even though I shouldn't say that while we're up here, but I have. I almost did a case on a lady who ate rice and like apples for like a year so that she would end up on dialysis. So do that cautiously. I know everyone in the room will be careful. I'm not going against guidelines and what the glomerulus does with the intraglomerular pressures of protein. I can't comment on that, but we know that eating too much protein does increase the pressures. But okay. So now I'm going to go to a topic that's dear to me, how dialysis is catabolic. Aside from having kidney disease and inflammation, dialysis doesn't help it, so that's another factor. So amino acids, so ever since I've been a dietitian, before I read the slides, everyone says, oh, usually they tell me 6 to 12, but I can only find the reference for 9 to 12. So they tell me you lose 6 to 12 grams of amino acids or protein when you're on dialysis. And I'm sitting here thinking, well, is that a lot? Is that a little? So I asked ChatGPT, was it a lot or is it a little? And then it came out with a reference. So each 4-hour hemodialysis session removes that. And this causes an approximate 20% drop in circulating plasma amino acid concentration during a single session. So this is the part where we have to remember that physiology is very, very complicated, and people say these blanket statements like I'm going to tell you now, and it is a simplification of multiple different processes in the body. I asked one of our doctors to look at that, and he gave me like a 12-page summary of many different studies about liver synthesis and all kinds of things that go on. But at the end of the day, you still lose protein, and your body draws on muscle to replace the protein losses. But it's not as simple like that. I don't want you to think it's simple like that. And then the other thing is the body, just being on dialysis is catabolic. Just, I think, the blood touching the membrane. So it's a very catabolic process. And they do this 3 times a week. And the deficit accumulates relentlessly. So they have their own kidney disease diagnosis, and the fact that they're on dialysis as another factor that is interfering with them having adequate protein. So this is why the protein requirements increase when they're on dialysis. And then I wanted to make a big emphasis about the 2 words that change everything. When a patient is metabolically stable, then you restrict them. The minute they don't eat, forget about it. I can't tell you how foreign that is. This Dr. Higazi and his thing, let them eat anything, let them eat everything. Even Dr. Kalantar Zeta has a, how many more? It has a, 2 minutes has a slide about that. Let them eat everything. So not all doctors like that idea, but to let them eat everything is the way to go. Okay, so that's sort of fun. So this is diet restriction versus diet liberalization. And this is now now it's guideline endorsed, because the new 2024 guidelines endorse that. Okay, now I'm going to talk about metabolic acidosis, which Jake spoke about, with taking sodium bicarb. So the major point of that is dietitians should look at the CO2 and flag it if it's too low, and that we're pushing the plant-based diet. I didn't want to have a whole thing about plant-based diet, but fruits and vegetables can bring a base and take care of that. It helps, and the phosphorus in plant-based foods are less available. So that's a big deal to have it endorsed. And when food is not enough, there's oral nutrition supplements and IDPN. I missed the poster session yesterday, but I understand it was on giving a protein supplement to patients at the end of dialysis. And just because we're from Rochester, it's the Rochester team here, that protein supplement comes from Rochester. And it's usually well tolerated because it's not milk-based, and it is easy to take. Okay. Although many people don't like it, it's sort of like cough medicine, I think, like NyQuil. It doesn't have any aftertaste, and they have to chug it down. It's too bad. Okay. Well, of course, they have a say. And then there's also IDPN, which is intradialytic parenteral nutrition. I listened to a lecture this week. There is a study that showed that it didn't impact outcomes in 2017, and the lecture I heard last week was, the whole purpose was that it doesn't affect outcomes and improve outcomes. So it's available.
Why is it down there, though? Like, if you're rescuing, shouldn't you rescue before prevention?
You should rescue.
Maybe it's too late, is what I'm saying.
Yes, it needs to be started earlier. But the KDOQI says that you should wait 3 months on oral nutrition. And I think that's a little long.
Why are you getting to rescue before prevention, right?
Right. Well, that's good, because I'm glad you disagree. That's the point. You should start it when they're still eating less.
And enteral, how many other patients are you going to get
Moving into questions.
Well, no, that's good. No one is going to do a tube feeding. But this is taken from KDOQI. Yeah, yes, but that's a good point. Because no one is, even sometimes I thought we've needed to put PICC lines in patients for IDPN, for parenteral nutrition, and they don't do that. Though we have had people.
What I'm saying is a rescue measure, but it's not preventive. That might be effective
Right, so you heard we've said that it's a rescue measure, not a prevention method. Which is a problem for enteral feedings in ITBN. Okay, so precision nutrition, I'm not going to go over that because it means applying the right intervention to the right patient at the right time, no single protein target. It just means individualization, because we all do this. The RD integrates stage, metabolic stability, comorbidities, nutritional status, functional status into every decision. So, but the final message is that the renal dietitian is uniquely positioned to deliver precision nutrition and to make help make the diagnosis or the screening for sarcopenia. And I do believe that to be true. So the elderly CKD patients, sarcopenia is really the disease of the elderly. So to be elderly and on dialysis is a double whammy. Most of our patients are elderly. I didn't present those statistics. And there it is, the practice point in older adults with frailty and sarcopenia, consider higher protein and calorie targets, and the geriatric guideline is 1 to 1 point per day, and more may be appropriate. And falls risks increase dramatically with sarcopenia. So, frailty is a syndrome. I'm not really going into it. And it's also driven by a lot of inflammation parameters. And transplant centers often have a frailty screening because they want to rehab their patients before they get a kidney. And I think that, and I know locally in Rochester, that's what they do. And it's really, I think everyone should do that. And I think we're done. Oh, here it is, the summary slide. Sarcopenia and malnutrition are common, serious, and under-recognized in CKD at every stage. The diagnostic tools are simple, validated, and accessible. SARC-F, hand grip strength, the malnutrition screening tool, the GLIM, and SGA for dialysis. But the barrier is not the tools, it is awareness and routine use. Protein restriction may protect kidney function. However, ad-lib protein intake may be in the best interest of the patient. Clinical judgment determines what takes priority. Diet liberalization to promote PO intake is a legitimate and evidence-based clinical decision. Physical activity, especially strength training, is the essential partner to nutrition and sarcopenia prevention. The renal dietitian has the access, the relationship, and the expertise to change outcome for these patients. And the hemodialysis patient receiving treatment 3 times per week gives the renal dietitian a unique opportunity to monitor weight changes, assess PO intake by history and monthly labs, and to encourage protein intake and exercise as indicated. So thank you. And then the next slide is references.
There are some questions here in the chat, in the Q&A. There was a question about the slides being available, and yes, they will be available. And there's a question that says, why use GLIM versus the Academy Aspen malnutrition criteria? Are either validated in the CKD population, and the Academy and criteria uses grip strength and GLIM does not? So why use GLIM versus the Academy?
That's a good question, and probably the person who asked it knows more than me about that. However, the GLIM literature, the sarcopenia literature speaks to GLIM. So that's why I was saying that, and they said we should use GLIM we should use malnutrition/PEW because it qualifies. Whoever asked that question, if you want to tell us more, then I'm fine with that.
I can try to help a little bit.
All right.
Okay, I think when you look in the guidelines, keeping in mind their guidelines, they're not always the most up-to-date literature, and there's been a lot published on physical activity and CKD since the guidelines have been published too. But keeping in mind those guidelines, the hand grip strength is like the only validated tool in CKD, end-stage kidney disease, all the above, for assessing loss of muscle function and strength, so essentially sarcopenia. It is not a malnutrition marker, so that's where the SGA and the malnutrition inflammation screen and those come in. So they're a little bit different than talking about GLIM and things like that too. But it's a very useful tool, but again, it can be used in your screenings, but not to be used just alone, and can be used toward all the other things together.
Not made that clear.
Yeah.
Because the protein energy wasting is valid in our patients, but just reading the pure sarcopenic literature, they use GLIM. But they do refer, actually Aspen and the European group was involved in the GLIM meeting. And then also, the other thing is the amount of literature that's been published, you're right, most recently, like everyone is getting, like, it's hot. People have figured out sarcopenia now, whereas it had a slow start. It's appeared to be much more addressed in Europe. Is that correct?
Outside of my realm.
But that's what I think, and I apologize for not being an expert, but that was my assessment.
We have some questions here.
And now we can invite experts for your next year, whoever's in charge for next year.
I wanted to bring up kind of the elephant in the room from the CKD side of things, like what in the world do we do, right? We're like, no protein, but we need all this protein for muscle, like good gravy. So, and also my favorite topic of plant-based diets, it seems to me the obvious answer is trying to get more protein from plants, especially if we think that metabolic acidosis is partially what is like exacerbating this muscle breakdown situation in CKD patients. So I wanted to ask Dr. May, what are your thoughts on the benefit of plant-based versus animal-based protein for muscle synthesis? In my very limited knowledge of this, it seems to be the same, but I was wondering if you have different information for me.
Yeah, awesome question. There's two lines of research in the realm to look into. One, if we compare standardized protein intake from a plant-based origin or an animal-based origin, the impact on protein turnover looks equivalent. Where that may break down is in individuals that have a blunted response to protein synthesis. So our best understanding is that there's roughly a threshold of leucine content that we need to intake within our protein to optimally trigger protein synthesis. Often, plant-based foods have a lower leucine content than animal-based foods. In the general healthy population, it doesn't seem to be beyond a point that makes a difference. In older adults, it does seem to be beyond a point that makes a difference. So in older adults, we can give protein plus extra leucine, and that can re-optimize protein synthesis rates. It's possible in CKD, a plant-based version may not optimize protein synthetic responses. That is all speculation, but just thinking through that. So if you're going to do something like that, and there was research down the line, I'd say probably need to test plant-based versions, look at their leucine content, and look at it with leucine supplementation. But that's getting really into the weeds. So then, like, taking a step back, like, yeah, they're probably equivalent.
Yeah. Interesting. Thank you.
Thanks for a great talk. I had a question about, do you find that dietitians are adjusting the way they're managing patients on dialysis and late CKD who are being treated with GLP-1 receptor agonists? Because up until now, a lot of medical-based weight management didn't really apply to patients on dialysis. And I'm a nephrologist, and I'm seeing it more used in dialysis clinics, but there's no data. And it seems like a lot of the measures to monitor for malnutrition might be thrown off as someone starts to intentionally lose weight with GLP-1 receptor agonists. And I know, and then it comes in the protein debate too. So I just was wondering if you've started adjusting how you approach those patients, and if not, are people thinking about adjusting how they approach these patients?
You want to start? I have a comment from the GLP-1 muscle line.
All right, I think that's a great question. If someone's on a GLP-1 and they're losing weight, we acknowledge that, and we just, because they need to get on the transplant list and make sure their other parameters are okay. So we fly by the seat of our pants. If the patient looks fine, then they are fine, they're eating okay, and they want to lose weight to get on the transplant list. So I don't know the answer. What really struck me is that it helps control fluid and helps control potassium. So it seemed more welcome, actually. But that's a good point.
It's a screening, though, it does say intentional versus unintentional.
Yes, okay.
That might be it when you're on a GLP-1.
Right, so the comment was that the slide says intentional versus unintentional weight loss. But that's an area for research, that's a great one.
I want to add one item, because in the GLP-1 weight loss realm, we've always had this concern of elevated muscle mass loss with the weight loss. This has been the coolest case study on why dietitians are important in all areas of clinical realms. What we saw early on with GLP-1 use, Step 1, Sustain 8, those sort of trials that were not using optimal lifestyle interventions with the medication, saw profound muscle loss. Beyond what we normally see when we do weight loss. It was like 40% of the weight that was lost was muscle. Later trials that were implementing dietitian-delivered lifestyle intervention in combination with GLP-1s, your downstream steps trials and whatnot, do not have that exacerbated muscle loss. So just an item on the GLP-1s, if you have a patient doing it, just another plug to like get a registered dietitian with them, make sure they're doing the exercise and as adequate a protein as they can with the CKD stuff, because the GLP-1 muscle loss risk was only when there was not adequate lifestyle with it. We haven't seen it replicated when adequate lifestyle is there. There are also ongoing studies to look at exercise and nutrition with GLP-1s as well.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question. And then I think it's really interesting too in patients who are sick and not, and elderly too with more chronic medical problems. So.
Yeah, and just a real life example of that, just like Sharon said, monitoring their status and their change is an important thing, because if you're looking at all the risk factors and their muscle strength, and everything's going fine is fine, but we had to take somebody off because their muscle strength deteriorated dramatically within the first 2 months. So just being aware of that, and the dietitian is the one who can identify that.
And I just have one anecdote. Our secretary stole our protein supplements for the patients who was on a GLP-1, the samples we get. So that message of eating more protein is getting home. Okay.
I'm Julius from University of California, San Francisco. So I would like to second Rachel's about the GLIM. So GLIM has a low agreement in terms, or poor agreement in terms of protein energies wasting score, PW score, and MIS. So in our hospital, we're using mostly the ASPEN guidelines for malnutrition criteria. But my question for you guys is, so we use that for inpatient and outpatient dialysis for the criteria of malnutrition. So would you recommend, in terms of the hand grip strength, because we started measuring all hand grip strength for all of our outpatient dialysis, now my question, would that be our baseline, or if there is automatically reduced hand grip strength for all of those patients, will they automatically be screened for sarcopenia?
I don't have the clinical experience to say exactly. I would say, because we have such great cutoffs for grip strength, I think you could use it if you wanted to as a baseline, yes, but I would 100% make sure you're always comparing those to the clinically defined cutoffs just to screen for it that way as well. I mean, I think you could dual use it. I'm not sure if that's exactly addressing your question, but like I think you could use it in both cases, look at trends over time, and then always apply the cutoffs as well.
Sure, yeah. So, but it's because we don't have like really like established criteria for the hand grip strength, and we're currently doing like kind of clinical trials on that, but we're still kind of did our own calculation in terms of sarcopenia, but yeah, that would be helpful to just us defining a specific condition, which are the cutoffs for hand grip strength. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, are you using any other measures that you could correlate it with? I mean, because grip strength is great, but I don't know if you have another battery of tests you could run.
Yeah, we do SPVB. We do our frailty scale for our patients, so that would help for us diagnosing sarcopenia. So.
I have a separate interest in using the respiratory muscles as a measure, like the peak expiratory flow as a measure of muscle loss as well. I don't know if you have the ability to do that, but I think that would be a really interesting one. If you're looking at defining your own equations and risk, PEF, I think, is an area that has been inappropriately untouched just because of how easy it is these days with new spirometry equipment.
Yeah, for our dialysis, we just started adding the hand grip strength, but for our other transplant patients, for like for the lung transplant, we created our own. So we have like ongoing on that. And when I compared actually some of our patients without the hand grip strength, they are not malnourished, but when we put the hand grip strength as part of the malnutrition diagnosis, they are malnourished based on aspirin criteria. So those are some of the things that still unclear, and we need to find out like how we can, standardize those criteria for different types of disease.
Yeah, no, it's a huge need. Are you guys are you planning to publish that work or?
No, we're ongoing clinical trials for hand grip strength and body composition for lung transplant, and I'm the one doing frailty and body composition using multi-frequency BIA. So we have all of those data, and I'm trying to do some secondary analysis on that.
Oh my gosh, cool. Well, if it does get published, I'll be looking forward to it.
You're going to bring a poster to next year's meeting, right? Bring a poster, We love preliminary data too. I don't have a question. I just thought I would try to help a little bit with the GLP-1 question, if that's okay.
Yeah.
I think it's a big topic of discussion and concern. We do know our patients, are trying to lose weight for transplant. We do know the GLP-1s cause rapid weight loss, and even though it's intentional, it doesn't mean our patients aren't malnourished, and we shouldn't, be monitoring all these things closely. I think it's important. We do know and recognize now with the dramatic weight loss it causes. We know that causes, muscle loss and protein losses and things like that too. May or may not be more than what you normally see with weight loss. Like we've always known, a lot of weight loss leads to a lot of muscle loss. We do know that, right, too. But I think it is important to know that, since our patients are high risk anyway of malnutrition and muscle loss and all these things, that we're having conversations with them up front when they're thinking about starting these GLP-1s with their providers, or we just found out they just started them, that we are the first ones working with them to say, you need to be doing physical activity right now. We're not talking about once it's too late and 2 months down the road once you're already frail, but as soon as I'm hearing that my patients are starting a GLP-1, I'm like, you need to be physically active, you need to keep your protein up, like these are not optional. Like these are things like either you're using my dialysis bike or I want to know what you're using at home, because we need to be reinforcing that as much as possible because they are such high fall risks and all these other things too. And my patients who aren't capable of being physically active, I'm like, should you be using a GLP-1 because you're already frail? Like, they're not going to pass you for transplant anyway because you are so frail. Losing this weight might not help you, but if there's other, health benefits they're going to get from it, other things, great. But they should also have a realistic understanding of what could potentially be coming down the road, and I think we can be helpful with all those things too. So I think it'll be a really exciting time coming forward as we do have more literature coming out and we do have some more science to put behind this for patients, but I think we can make a big impact here that we can discuss all these things with patients and try to hopefully make better outcomes for them as well too. So, thank you.
Yeah, I agree, Rachel, because it's just exploded into the dialysis world, and obviously the people that want to lose weight are excited, like, oh my goodness, I have an opportunity, but they don't think of all those other things that you just mentioned.
Were there other questions or just hanging out?
Comments,
Probably
questions?
people want to go for lunch, but I'm Anita, and I actually just came from the GLP-1 discussion, but I thought I might sneak in here and listen to the questions. But yeah, we just came from there, which showed the benefits for GLP-1 therapy with SLG2. Together, there's lower risk of death, lower risk of non-fatal cardiovascular events, like lower risk of all these things. So they're going to be ubiquitous at some point, right? The GLP-1s, I'm thinking. So we just need to be very well versed into how we integrate. I mean, how are we going to work with them, right? So that's just what I was going to say. But just to add to the previous comment, yeah.
Your comments are welcome.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. This was awesome. I mean, we went way over time, so this was cool to have this discussion with everyone. So yeah, thank you all for coming, and the discussion was great.